لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا أما بعد. In last week's lesson, we were looking at verse number 26 of Surah Al-Baqarah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَسْتَحْيِي أَن يَضْرِبَ مَثَلًا مَا بَعُوضَةً فَمَا فَوْقَهَا, which translates into that verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not ashamed to use as an example a fly or something bigger than that. Now, as I mentioned last week, that this particular verse is linked with verse number 23 of Surah Al-Baqarah. Because in verse number 23 of Surah Al-Baqarah, the disbelievers, they had a doubt that whether the Quran were the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that whether the Quran were the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or whether it was the words of some magician or someone like that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then laid down the gauntlet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laid down a challenge. And he said to the disbelievers that, okay, if you think that these are the words of a human being, that if you think that these are the words of some magician or Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then fa'atu bi suratin min misli, then bring forward a surah, bring forward a chapter. And then obviously from verse number 24, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is a challenge which these people, i.e. the disbelievers, will not do and will not be able to do. So from verse number 26, another objection of the disbelievers is being highlighted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the objection here is that the disbelievers, they were saying to themselves, or they said to themselves, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this sublime being, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this majestic being, then why is it that in the Holy Quran He uses examples or similes such as flies and ants and so on and so forth? And to explain this particular objection, I gave an example last week that a person who's very rich, who probably earns £1 million a year in salary, when he talks, then he will talk according to his standards. That when he talks about cars, he'll talk about Ferraris and Lamborghinis. When he talks about vacations and holidays, he'll talk about something somewhere exotic, somewhere Australia, somewhere America, South Africa, and so on and so forth. When he talks about shopping, you won't see that person shopping on Coventry Road or Alum Rock Road and so on. He'll be shopping in Harrods and Waitroses and so on and so forth. So the disbelievers, they thought that, okay, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this great being, if He is the creator of this world, then why is it that in this book He uses examples of flies, He uses examples of ants and spiders and so on and so forth? And particularly the objection they had was a verse of Surah Al-Ankabut, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَوْلِيَاءَ كَمَثَلِ الْعَنكَبُوتِ, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the belief of the disbelievers, and He says that the belief of the disbelievers is like a spider ittakhadhat bayta, who has made a house, who has made a cobweb. And I explained this last week that out of all the houses an animal has, the cobweb is the most weakest. You get lions, cheetahs, they live in dens. You get, for example, rats and scorpions, they live in burrows. You get like owls living in a nest and so on. However, out of all the houses, the most weakest is a cobweb, because a slight breeze or a slight wind can easily dismantle a cobweb, whereas a slight breeze or a wind would not dismantle a den, would not dismantle a nest, would not dismantle a burrow or a hole. So the disbelievers started objecting and they start saying to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that how is it that Allah is describing our beliefs with ants and houses of ants and spiders and so on and so forth? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving a reply by saying that, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's not ashamed in using examples and similes of spiders and ants and flies and so on. Why? Because He's the creator of this world. It's His book, it's His word. The way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to describe something, then He can do that. It's like, for example, if there is a master and he's got a slave underneath him in his ownership. So if a master says to the slave that I want you to do this, I want you to do that, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, then who can object to him? No one can say nothing. Why? Because this master, he is the owner of this slave. Whatever he wants to do with this slave, then he's got full discretion to do that. Exactly same as the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's his words, it's his book, it's, the words are the speech, is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However he wants to describe certain people, their beliefs and their kind of aqidah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the full discretion to do that. Now keeping this particular sentence in mind, another masla or another ruling is derived. And the masla or ruling some scholars have derived from this particular text is that a teacher or an imam, when he's giving a talk, or a teacher when he's explaining something, then it is permissible for him to use reprehensible examples to explain something. Just say if a teacher wants to explain a particular ruling or masla, and he uses examples such as urine or stool or something like really disgusting and so on. As long as he's using that example to explain something, to highlight something, then to use reprehensible things as examples or similes are permissible or is permissible in Islam. And this can be seen exactly from this particular verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to describe the belief of the disbelievers, he uses examples of spiders and flies and ants and so on and so forth. So similarly, a teacher, if he wants to explain something like about a particular masla or an issue and so on, and he gives examples of stool or urine or adultery and fornication, these disgusting and reprehensible things, then it is permissible for him to do that. You can't say to the teacher, oh, look, teacher, look, why are you using examples of like urine and stool and so on? Okay, because obviously the basis of it can be found in this particular verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used examples which were against his sublimity, against his majesty, such as spiders and ants and so on. So you can use those examples. And obviously many students see obviously in books such as like Hidayah and other books and so on, obviously you realize that there are many examples where there will be a particular masla or a particular ruling, and then the author will use examples of like adultery and fornication. Sometimes the author will use examples of like fornication and adultery. The reason why, not all the time, but sometimes, and the reason why is that if it is being used to explain a ruling, then it is permissible. Now, as promised last week, in last week's lesson, that from this particular verse, we'll be touching on three particular issues here. The first issue which we are going to look at, as we have touched on spider webs and cobwebs and so on, is the masla or the ruling regarding cleaning cobwebs from your house. The second issue then we'll move on to will be, what does Islam say regarding animals? And in particular, whether a Muslim can have pets or not. And the third issue which we are going to look at is whether it is permissible to kill like what you call domestic pests like flies, insects, these kind of things with a spray or something like that, whether it's permissible in Islam or not. Now the first issue, which is very straightforward, is regarding cleaning cobwebs from your house. Now with regards to this particular masla, there's actually two opinions. The first opinion given by a famous scholar in the name of Khatib Baghdadi rahmatullah alayh, he says that it is actually, or he considered it reprehensible and disliked cleaning cobwebs from your house. And the reason why Khatib Baghdadi rahmatullah gave this particular opinion was because a cobweb saved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from being captured by the disbelievers. Everybody must be aware of the story that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was migrating from Mecca to Medina Munawwara, then he was being chased by the disbelievers. So what happened was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, they hid in the cave of Thawr. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, went inside the cave, the spider, it spun its web over the entrance of the cave. And when the disbelievers passed by this particular cave, they saw that there's actually a cobweb there, and they thought to themselves that there's no way a person could have entered in this particular cave and then straight away a spider web being formed. So they left that particular cave and they went away, and then, as you know, after a while, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu proceeded with their journey. So because of this particular incident, Khatib Baghdadi rahmatullahi alayhi was of the view that it is considered makruh and disliked to clean cobwebs from your house. However, the second opinion, which is the most correct opinion, and obviously when you look at hadiths regarding purification and cleanliness, it fits with the second opinion, and that is that it is permissible to clean cobwebs from your house. Okay, so if there are cobwebs, you move into a new house and there's cobwebs there and so on, so even if you do clean it, then it's not considered reprehensible, it's not considered disliked or makruh. And the basis of this particular ruling can be found in a hadith or in a saying attributed to Sayyiduna Ali radiallahu anhu, in which Sayyiduna Ali radiallahu anhu says, طَهِّرُوا بُيُوتَكُمْ مِنْ نَسْجِ الْعَنْكَبُوتِ, that purify your homes, طَهِّرُوا بُيُوتَكُمْ مِنْ نَسْجِ الْعَنْكَبُوتِ, from cobwebs. فَإِنَّ تَرْكَهُ يُورِثُ الْفَقْرَ, because by leaving cobwebs, يُورِثُ الْفَقْرَ, results in poverty. So Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu is saying that if you were to leave cobwebs around in your home, then it may result in poverty. So because of this particular asar and this particular statement of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, he considered it permissible. And obviously when we look at hadiths regarding purification in Islam, as-tuhuru shatrul iman, that cleanliness and purification is half of iman, we can derive that it is permissible to remove cobwebs from your homes and your buildings and houses and shops and so on and so forth. So that was the first issue. The second issue which we are going to look at is with regards to what does Islam say regarding animals. Now, what is Islam's view or take regarding animals? Now, contrary to what is portrayed in the media and probably on various internet sites, Islam, and in particular Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was very kind, was very merciful, was very loving and compassionate towards animals. And I'll just relate a couple of hadiths to you, and inshallah from these two hadiths you can see how much love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had upon animals. The first hadith is a hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, narrated by Sayyiduna Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that a woman, she entered hell. Now automatically you may be thinking to yourself, okay, this woman, she entered hell. She must have been a very bad woman, that she must have killed someone, she must have committed adultery, fornication, she must have become a kafir, disbeliever, she may have become a apostate and so on. She must have done so many bad things. That's why this woman is entering hell. But from the next part of the hadith, which I'm going to narrate to you, you'll be amazed why this woman is entering hell. The reason why she's entering hell is not because she killed someone. The reason why she's entering hell, not because she committed adultery, fornication, not because she didn't read her prayers, not because she didn't fast, not because she didn't give zakat. The reason why this woman is entering hell is because she had a cat. And she tied this cat and she did not give any food or anything to the cat to eat or drink. And not even that, this woman should not even let the cat loose so that it can eat the vermin of the earth, meaning that it can eat the insects and the spiders of the earth. Now you could understand, okay, that this woman, she may have been poor, so she couldn't probably have afforded any kind of food or any water for this particular cat. But the very least what she could have done is loosen the cat so that it can eat the insects, the spiders and ants which crawl on the earth. The cat could have eaten that, but she didn't do that. And because of that, that cat died. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that because of this abuse on this particular cat, on this particular creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this woman will enter hell and this woman will enter the fire of Jahannam. Another hadith, also of Sahih al-Bukhari, but this time narrated by Sayyiduna Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that there was once a prostitute, a woman who was a prostitute, and she entered Jannah, and she entered paradise. So again, you may be thinking that okay, this woman, she was a prostitute, which is something bad, but she must have changed her life. She must have, for example, did tawbah from what she used to do before. She must have become a really religious woman. She must have read all her prayers, gave zakat, fast, everything. She must have gone for hajj and so on and so forth. She must have become so religious. That's why she's entering Jannah and paradise. But again, when you read the next part of the hadith, you'll be amazed that this woman who was a prostitute, she entered Jannah. The reason why she's entering Jannah is because she once saw a dog panting. This dog, when they are thirsty, then they start panting. So she saw a dog panting. Now, even then, she didn't do something amazing. She didn't go and look for a jug. She didn't go and look for a kind of bucket or a rope so that she can lower the bucket into the well. What she did was that she got her shoe. Now, obviously, many of us will agree, or all of us will agree, that out of all the clothing we wear, the shoe is the most reprehensible part of our clothing because it smells there. It stinks. So what she did was that she got her shoe, she lowered it into the well, got some water, got the shoe out, and then gave a few drops to this dog, because of which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to grant her Jannah and paradise. So from these two hadiths, and there's many hadiths, I could go on for hours just looking at some various hadiths. So from these two hadiths, we can get a taste that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in particular Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are very kind on animals. Because at the end of the day, animals are a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even to the extent which we're going to look at later regarding dogs, that even though dogs, their saliva is najisul ayn, is filthy, but you can't kill dogs. If you just see a dog, you can't get a gun and start shooting the dog down. You can't do that. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is mentioned in a hadith as well of Sunnah Abu Dawood and Sunan Tirmidhi, where the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if dogs were not a nation amongst the nation, meaning that if dogs weren't a creation amongst the creation, i.e. amongst us, then I would have ordered the dog to be killed, i.e. I would have ordered dogs to be killed. So from this hadith we can derive that because dogs are a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just because of that we can't just start killing them. Just because I'm going to mention later, it's impermissible to keep them as pets, right? It doesn't mean that we can kill them. Even pigs as well, even though it's impermissible to eat pigs, haram, everything. But even then, if we just see a pig, we can't just start killing it without any reason. Okay, so that is the ruling with regard to all creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, keeping those two hadiths in mind, we can come to the conclusion that having pets or keeping pets is something which is permissible in Islam. Okay, so keeping pets and so on is something which is permissible and something which is lawful in Islam. Obviously, there are some exceptions which I'm going to mention later, but animals which are halal, lawful, like for example cats and so on, you can keep them as pets. Budgies, parrots and so on, these kind of things you can keep them as pets. Just a few rulings here. If you are going to keep a cat as a pet, okay, just one rule, that is that its excretion, i.e. its stool and its urine, is called najasat ghaliza, meaning it's a heavy type of impurity. Okay, so if you got a cat in your house and it's pooing everywhere and it's urinating everywhere, then that place where he has urinated or where he has pooed, then that place has now become nafaq and impure. So you have to make sure that you clean that. With regard to parrots and budgies, because they are considered as lawful animals, halal birds, so their excretion, their stool is actually pure. So just for example, you've got a cage and a parrot inside and it's actually pooing everywhere, then if the poo was to fall on your clothes or anything, then you don't have to wash that. Obviously you will wash it, you're not going to walk around with parrot poo all over you, but obviously you will do it, but I'm just talking about in terms of masla and fiqhi aspects, it's actually considered part. So if you didn't realize that you had parrot poo all over you and you came to the mosque and you read namaz, then your namaz will be accepted. Okay, so just a couple of rulings to keep in mind. So that is the issue with regard to pets, that just generally speaking, cats, budgies and so on, you're allowed to keep as a pet. Now there are a few exceptions, a few animals which you can't keep as a pet. Now, what is the list? Now, to tell the truth, there isn't a complete list. The list isn't exhaustive. So I'll just mention a few animals. So normally what people normally tend to keep as a pet. So I'll just mention a few which in Islam you're not allowed to keep as a pet. Now, the hadith which indicates towards the impermissibility of keeping the following animals as pets is a hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih al-Muslim, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that there are 5 animals who are called fawasiq. Now, fawasiq means vicious. So there are 5 animals who are called fawasiq, basically 5 vicious animals, 5 harmful creatures who you cannot keep as a pet. Now we'll just go over them one by one. Firstly, a black crow. Okay, so the black crow, because they eat people, or they actually attack people, they eat dead animals and so on. So therefore, a black crow you cannot keep as a pet. Number 2, a kite. So again, kite is like a falcon, is like a hawk. It's like one of those birds of prey. They attack people, they eat dead meat. So because of this reason, you're not allowed to keep a kite as a pet. Number 3, a scorpion. So again, scorpion, because they are harmful creatures, they may attack humans, they may bite at humans and so on. So because of that reason, it is not permissible to keep scorpions as pets. Number 4, rats or mice. Now, to keep a mouse as a pet or a rat as a pet is something which is impermissible and something which is not allowed in Islam. Now, a rat or a mouse, I know that some Muslim families, I'm aware, they actually have a rat as a pet. Okay, now what do you mean as a pet? Like a proper pet, not like the ones which run around the kitchen and so on, but they actually have it as a pet. Now, to keep a rat as a pet or a mouse as a pet, then that is something which is not allowed in Islam. And the reason why is rats are considered as harmful creatures. They're considered as vicious creatures. And I'll give you an example to show their vicious nature and their harmful nature from a hadith of Sunan Abu Dawud. Now it's narrated by Sayyidina Ibn Abbas ibn Anhu that once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was sitting on a mat, and next to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam there was a lantern. So all of a sudden, from nowhere, a rat came and it dragged the wick of the lantern. Now the wick is a stick which you'll find in a lantern, which actually draws the liquid up from the container inside so that it can burn the fuel. So this rat, it dragged the wick from the lantern and it threw it where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sitting, i.e. on the mat upon which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sitting. And it burnt a hole equivalent to a 50-pence coin, i.e. a dirham equivalent to a 50-pence coin. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when you go to sleep, extinguish your lamps. Why? Because shaitan will tell creatures like this, i.e. rats, to do this, i.e. knock your lanterns over so that you may be burnt. That is a hadith of Sunan Abu Dawud. And another hadith of Sahih al-Muslim, more clear, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that when you go to sleep, extinguish your lamp. Why? Because a house in Medina Munawwara was burnt. And the way it was burnt, it comes in the hadith of Sahih al-Muslim, that there was a lantern and a rat came and he knocked the lantern over and he burnt the whole house down. So keeping these 2 hadiths in mind, we can derive the harmful nature and the vicious nature of a rat. So to keep rats or mice or anything like that as a pet is something which is not allowed, something which is impermissible in Islam. And I'll give you another story to show their vicious nature again. Everybody probably may not have heard of this particular story, but it's mentioned in the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about a group of people called Saba. لَقَدْ كَانَ لِسَبَإٍ فِي مَسْكَنِهِمْ آيَةٌ. Now in that particular story, what happened was, Saba, i.e. the people of Saba, they lived in a place called Ma'arib, which is around 3 miles away from the capital city of Yemen, which is Sana'a. So 3 miles away, there was a place called Ma'arib. And Ma'arib was in a place which was between two mountains. So you got Ma'arib there, and next to Ma'arib there were two mountains. And what would happen is that Ma'arib was known as a place which used to get flooded all the time, because the rain would fall on the mountain top, and then the rain would gush down the mountain slope, and it will flood Ma'arib. It was known as one of those places that it's always flooding there, it's always saturated with water. So what happened was that the people of Sabah, they made two dams. Okay, so they made two dams either side of the city. One was on this side, one was on the other side. And what was so special about these dams was that not only it stopped water from saturating the city of Ma'arib, but they used it as like a container. They used it as like a big tank, like a reservoir, where when the water reached a certain limit, they would open the gate and water will come to the people, so people would use it for like washing purposes, for cleaning their clothes, for bathing, and so on and so forth. And remember, this story is about many hundreds, thousands of years ago. So in that time, that is something which is considered very sophisticated. Now we just, deem it as normal, like Severn Trent, through the roads we get pipes and so on. But in those days, it was considered very sophisticated. So this was Sabah, and next to the mountain slopes there were beautiful gardens, beautiful fruits they would eat and so on, and they would live a very luxurious and a very happy life. But as those who probably read the Quran, studied the Quran as well, you probably realize that when these people, they failed to recognize that all these things were from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they started disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Various prophets were sent to them, and they started disobeying the prophets. They didn't listen to the prophets. So as a punishment, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did was, He sent rats to that particular place. And the rats started nibbling and started biting at the dams. And it started biting, nibbling at the dams to such an extent that the foundation of the dam collapsed, weakened, it collapsed, and it flooded all the people and they all died. So if you again look at the story, obviously we'll say that, just looking at the story from the outset, that obviously the reason why these people were destroyed was because they disobeyed Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a punishment. But when you look at the apparent cause for their destruction was that the rats, they started biting at the foundation, causing them to drown. So again, this particular story and incident shows the vicious and the harmful nature of rats. So the conclusion is that to keep rats or mice as a pet, then that is something which is not allowed and something which is not permissible in Islam. And the fifth animal which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the hadith is al-qalbul aqur. Now qalb aqur translates in English as a ferocious dog. So to keep a Rottweiler, the ones who like attack children and so on, or even like they attack you as well, if you're sometimes running, so they run after you. So to keep them as pets and so on, and that is something which is not permissible, and that is something which is not allowed in Islam. Now what is the masla regarding dogs? Now the masla is that to keep them as pets, that is not allowed. You can keep them for hunting purposes, or for guarding purposes, or if you are blind, then to assist the blind and so on, to help guide the blind, then you can keep dogs as, not as a pet, but for those purposes. But to keep them as a pet, then that is something which is not allowed, and that is something which is not permissible in Islam. Now it's mentioned in the hadith of Sahih al-Muslim narrated by Sayyidina Ibn Abbas ibn Anhu, that he narrates from, or he reports from Sayyida Maymuna radiallahu anha. Now Maymuna was the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she narrates that once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very sad, and she asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that why are you sad? So he replied that Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam promised me that I will come yesterday night I will come to visit you, but he did not come. So because of that reason, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sad. When all of a sudden Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw a puppy in his house, a dog, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw that in his house. So he ordered the Sahabas to remove the puppy, and he ordered that particular place where the puppy was to sprinkle some water and to clean that particular part. Later on that day, Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, he came, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him that, why didn't you come yesterday night? Upon which Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam replied by saying, لا تدخل الملائكة بيتا فيه كلب أو سورة. That malaikas and angels of Allah, they do not enter homes where there are dogs, فيه كلب أو سورة, or where there are pictures. So you've got pictures in your house and so on, then malaikas and angels, they don't enter that particular house or that particular room. You've got a dog in that room, malaikas and angels will not enter that particular house or that particular room. And in another hadith, this is of Sunan Abu Dawud, it's got the word wala junubun, that if a person is in need of a bath, then again, malaikas and angels, they don't enter that particular house. And actually touched on this particular topic when we were looking at the marriage course last year, that when you probably had sexual intercourse with a wife, then it's actually preferable and recommended that you have a bath afterwards. Because if you just stay there in your bed all the way until Fajr or all the way until the morning, so during that 6-7 hours, there's no angels in your room, there's no angels in your house. Okay, so it's very important that even though it's considered mustahab, that you, after you've had your sexual intercourse, straight away you go for a bath. The reason why I've mentioned the hadith is because angels, they don't enter. So keeping this particular hadith in mind, we can derive that to keep dogs as a pet or in the home, then that is something which is not allowed, something which is not permissible. However, if it's for farming purposes, hunting purposes, or if it's used to guide the blind, then that is something which is allowed and that is something which is permissible. Now, you may be thinking that what is the wisdom behind the prohibition of keeping dogs as pets? Now, why can't we keep dogs? What's the harm in it? Like the same way we are allowed to keep cats as pets, then why can't we keep dogs as pets? Now, the answer is very straightforward. There's two wisdoms, or there's two reasons why. The first reason is that, this is an example which we'll understand as well, is that in this world, if you hang around with good people, then you will also be good as well. Okay, if there is a person or a friend who's religious, who comes to the masjid all the time, then he will also drag you along as well, and slowly what will happen is that you will see that you're getting religious, and then you by yourself will start coming to the masjid. Similarly, if we've got bad friends, so even though you may be religious, even though you may have a beard and so on, but when you hang around with bad people, slowly their characteristics and their traits will come into your life. And slowly what will happen is that you will start missing your prayers, and you will start doing things which are against the Sharia and against Islam. Now, a dog is a very fierce animal. Okay, it's a very fierce animal and a fierce creation of Allah. And we probably heard some stories, well, not stories, actually it was in the news the last week, that there was this child who got killed by a dog, a Rottweiler, and then I think the uncle has been arrested by the police, probably for manslaughter or something like that. So again, we can see that dogs, they are wild, they are very fierce, they attack people. Okay, not only do they attack humans like us or those who are grown-ups and adults, they even attack babies. They don't care what's a baby, they don't know why it's a baby to them. So they even attack babies, children, and so on and so forth. So because of that fierce nature of a dog, Rasulullah ﷺ has prohibited men and humans and Muslims to hang around with dogs, to have dogs as their best friend. Okay, that is not something which is allowed or permissible in Islam. So that is one wisdom. And the second wisdom with regards to the prohibition of keeping dogs as pets is because, as we know, the saliva of a dog is very, very dangerous. And through the saliva of a dog, various infectious diseases can be produced or can be created, such as rabies. That's why if a dog bites, first thing you should do is go to the hospital. Okay? Probably there'll be a lot of pain, but the reason why you should go to the hospital is because so that you can check whether you got rabies or not. Because obviously when they bite, then in their saliva, in their teeth, there's because of the infectious saliva, you can easily be infected with rabies and so on and so forth. So because of these reasons, Sharia and Islam, Rasulullah ﷺ has prohibited keeping dogs as pets. Just one final masla with regards to dogs is that just remember that it's only the dog's saliva which is impure, which in fiqh terminology is called najasul ayn. It's only the dog's saliva. The body of a dog the hair of a dog isn't napak or isn't impure. Okay, so just say for example you're just walking and a dog comes and he brushes his body against your clothes, so your clothes doesn't become impure. Okay, it's only if he had licked you, say, or if his saliva had come into your clothes, then obviously only then you will wash that particular part of your clothing. But if his body, just say for example, brushes your clothes, then your clothes doesn't become impure, doesn't become najas. The reason why is that the ruling is that it's only the saliva which is impure and not the body of the dog. Okay, so we'll just finish the dars by mentioning this particular final masla. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to accept one being said. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.
One is that in Hidayah, there is Ibarat which says that Farrat in Hayyati is complete Bawafina min al-Buyut. But they consider it to be
it's saliva. It's saliva, not its excretion, not its urine, just its saliva. There's najas khafifa.
So if they consider it to the Farra and Bawafin, Farra and Hayya min Bawafin al-Buyut, but then the hadith says that if you can't keep them in the house, and they say that it's Bawafin.
No, you can't. You can't keep dogs in the house, but like cats and everything, that's okay. You can keep that as a pet. Okay.
How do they consider it to be?
Yeah, because you know what is mentioned in the hadith here is that if it's like domestic pets and pets who like roam around in your home, it doesn't mean that you can keep rats as a pet. It's not saying that, just like, you know, because like in people's houses there may be like rats and mice and so on. So basing on that, not on the actual, you can't do istidlal from there that you can keep pets as a, sorry, you can keep rats as a pet.
If they consider like oil and the saliva to be something which يتعرف من اللحم. So if the lahm itself is not najis al-ayn, so how can, if the lahm itself is not najis al-ayn, then how can the saliva be najis al-ayn?
It's actually from another hadith, and we derive that the dogs, the saliva is najis al-ayn. Yes, yes. In that particular situation, we don't apply that usul, that the saliva depends on the meat of the dog. Right. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. صلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمته الله.